Hey everyone, it's Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. This week, we're going to explain to you why you should get yourself a discount when you invest. But more importantly, we're going to give you multiple strategies that you can use yourself to achieve the Holy Grail and getting yourself a discount when investing.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Yep, this week we are here to save you some money. In case you don't know, we have a company that buys over £100 million worth of property for our clients every year. You can find out about that at propertyhub.net/invest. But before we get into the serious business of saving you some cash, let's have a look at this week's news.
So it's time for our news story of the week, and this week's news story is on rent controls. In England, we've often talked about Scotland and often reported how it's pretty much failed as a concept in Scotland. But in England, there has been some nervousness around rent controls if Labour come into power. Now, Labour, on multiple occasions, have said that they will not be introducing rent controls. But we have two contrasting stories here today, and it seems it's a bit of a definitely maybe on rent controls, Rob. The first headline suggests that, once again, Labour have denied rent controls are coming in. And the second headline, it's a slight contradiction to that, and they're only a week apart.
Yeah, their position on the matter was abundantly clear. There will be no rent controls. And that position was abundantly clear for 6 days. Because then Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves apparently went on BBC Local Radio and said that there may be a case for controlling rents in certain areas. She said, I think it should be up to local areas to decide. There may be the case for that in some areas, but as a blanket approach, I'm not convinced by that. I don't know about you, Rob, but that sounds to me quite a lot like rent controls. And of course, that is something that Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has been pushing for years now. So could it be that he's going to get his way?
I'm not sure. The first piece was in the national newspaper, The Guardian. The second was on local radio. I wonder, and I don't know, but I wonder if, because the first piece has come out, there's been a bit of internal backlash and Rachel Reeves has now moved her positioning slightly. Does this mean we all need to be nervous about rent controls? I don't think so. I'm not nervous. I am obviously frustrated by the lack of clarity, because if you look at any opinion poll right now, we will be under a Labour government, whether you listening likes that or not. That seems to be the case. So the introduction of rent controls is not something I'm keen on. And after seeing what's happened in Scotland, I don't think anybody should be keen on, tenants or landlords. So we will keep an eye on this. I don't think it's going to panic mode just yet, but we will keep an eye on this and keep looking out for quotes as the election builds. And saying all that, I've heard governments be very strong on a position leading up to an election and then completely flip-flop and change their mind or not deliver upon it after an election. So even if they come out strongly one way or another that they will not have rent controls or they absolutely will have rent controls, it still might not happen anyway. But we will keep you updated. And if there's any major housing policies that are announced by any of the other major political parties, we'll keep you updated as well. It is election year, so you will find us covering the latest movements of what's happening in the world of property and politics. When those two worlds clash, we'll bring you the news.
There are many wonderful things about property as an investment, but one of those things, quite near the top of the list, is you don't have to pay full price for it. There are no circumstances in which you'd be able to buy a share in a listed company for less than the quoted price. But in property, there's someone grabbing themselves a bargain every day. And we have a business with a team that every day goes out securing discounts for our clients. So in this episode, we're going to share lots of different methods that you can use to secure yourself a discount.
Now, Rob, I hope we don't have to work too hard on this first segment, which is why you should go for a discount. I'm hoping we don't need to convince people, but the benefits, some are obvious, but some might not be. So I think it is worth just touching on briefly. The first reason, other than why wouldn't you want to get a better deal, is that you get that instant equity cushion. So if your property is at 100k value and you get it for, say, 80k, then you would get a 75% loan to value mortgage on the 80k, which means that you'd be getting a mortgage of 60k. So if the property is truly worth £100,000, then in that example, you have 40% equity. Now, I've just given you a 20% discount, which is probably impossible to do, but it was just easier for my maths. But you get the idea. It builds in that instant equity. It will give you that cushion. And even if you just get a few % off, it's going to give you an extra cushion. So for that reason alone, it's worthwhile. But Rob, there's other reasons.
Yeah, what you said is probably the big one, but it also, of course, improves your return on investment, or ROI. And that's easy to understand why if you know that equation. It doesn't affect the return. The rental return is the same, but you're putting in a smaller investment. So giving an example of what it does to your ROI is impossible because everyone will have different costs and mortgage rates and things like that. But if you take a really simple example of what it does to your headline yield, if you've got a £200,000 property that's making £1,000 per month in rent, then that is a gross yield of 6%. If you get your 20% discount, Rob, that takes the gross yield up to 7.5%. That, like you said, is probably not possible, but even a 10% discount would get you to a gross yield of 6.6%. So a discount is basically free money. It's equity that you can tap into later, and it improves your rental return along the way.
So it seems that everybody should go for a discount if it's possible. Well, actually, later on, we will discuss why potentially you might not want to. And there are some circumstances where that may be the case. But let's stick to we want this for now, because for the majority of people, you will. So it's important to establish at this point that a discounted price is not necessarily a true discount, because the asking price in the first place may have been inflated. So what you will need to do is establish that the asking price, the number that you are achieving a discount from, is the true value of the property that you're going for. How do you do that? It's actually pretty easy. There's so much information now available on the net that you can get a good idea of what a true value of a property is worth. So just go on Rightmove and look at comparables. Now, of course, they are other asking prices, and they also may be inflated. But if you look at enough of them, you start to get an idea. The next level up from that is looking at land registry. Again, Rightmove gives you sold prices in the immediate area that you're looking at. And I'm pretty sure Zoopla does the same. And there are other websites you can use. But it's simple. That's the point. Go and look at what other properties in your immediate area, like-for-like properties, so similar condition, have sold for. And you will then start to establish what the true market value is. Now, if you are investing in a city or a major town, getting comparables is pretty easy. But what if you're investing outside of one of those areas? Well, it does become trickier because there's not as much info to go at. You also may find brand new developments. So major national UK developers will build mini villages. They'll build huge new areas, and establishing what a true value there is challenging. But what you can do is, if you go and negotiate with one of these developers, is say to them, prove to me what you've sold the others for, so you can get the numbers others have paid. Now, you may be thinking, oh, why don't I just look on land registry? Well, if it is a new development, it may have not gone on land registry yet. So you can just ask the direct question. If there's a reluctance there, then you want to be cautious. But something we do, if we ever broker a deal with one of these developers and it's a new development and the pricing levels haven't been established in that area yet, well, of course, we look at the comparables we can look at, but often it's difficult because the spec of the new builds are better, or the condition at least is better. So what we do instead is get proof. We get contracts of deals that have already been done on that site to give us confidence that the pricing is at that level, and then we negotiate a discount from there.
So that may be the most important point of this whole show. You need to make sure that you're getting a true discount from market value, not asking price. And we hammer this point home because it is so common to go, I got 10% off the asking price. What a great deal. You don't know whether the asking price was inflated by 10% or not in the first place. So the best thing you can do is forget that there is an asking price. Put it out of your mind. Don't get anchored to that price. Figure out the market value and negotiate from there. So that's how you know if you're achieving a discount. But how do you go about doing it? Well, there are loads of different potential angles for achieving a discount. We'll start with how we do it at Property Hub Invest. Even though this is pretty niche, and we'll talk about lots of others, it's worth covering, which is effectively we buy in bulk. So we have relationships with developers, and we give them the ability to shift a quantity of properties quickly. So two common situations are that you've got somebody who's near the start of the build process, so it's an off-plan deal. And if they achieve a certain number of sales early, it unlocks cheaper lending for them, it makes other counterparties involved in the deal happier, and it gets some momentum going that'll be helpful to them when they're moving on and selling the rest. The other common situation is right at the end of a development. So you often get this with the big national developers. They've got a handful left at the end of a site and they just want to sell all of them so they can move on to the next one. We don't only do new properties, but those are a couple of typical examples. We go to them and say, we have the ability to sell all of these within such and such a time frame, and in return, we want a discount. And in that process, we go through exactly the exercise that Rob just talked about to make sure that we're always achieving that discount from the actual market value. Now, you could do a small-scale version of this. If you got together with a couple of others, even if you're only going in to buy 3, it's still an improvement on buying 1. And if the circumstances are right, you may be able to get a stronger deal. So that's a method that you can use on your own. But there are others, Rob.
Another way to potentially achieve a discount is being a cash buyer. Cash buyers can move quickly because they're not going to need to get a mortgage. That is a position of strength. Now, it doesn't work with every vendor. It doesn't mean just because you're a cash buyer, you will get a deal. But if the seller is motivated to sell because they may have found another property that they want to live in, or their situation dictates that they need to move quickly, then being a cash buyer can put you in a strong position. The same goes for someone who's not in a chain. If you're not part of a chain and you are using a mortgage, but you just will buy and it's not reliant on you selling your property, then again, it puts you in a stronger position. Maybe not quite as strong as cash, but it still is a position of strength if it's meaningful to the vendor. I actually talked one of my family members through putting an offer in who was in this very position. And what I got him to do is when he found the property is understand the motivations of the buyer. And then one of the motivations was to move quickly because they found their dream home. So I got him to position his offer playing on the strengths of that he wasn't relying on anyone else and could move quickly. So it wasn't a cash buyer, but was able to move quickly because wasn't part of a chain. And he managed to negotiate a true 5% discount. So that is a meaningful number. 5%, most people don't get any percent. Some people overpay. So a true 5% discount, just by putting the time in to understand the motivations of the seller and understanding your position of your strength, is well worth it. That's several £1,000s. So definitely worth going to the effort of doing that. Another way to achieve getting a discount is follow up on offers that have fallen through. So you may have put a discounted offer in, and you get rejected and someone else is the winner of that process. But if that deal falls through, come back in and remind people of your number, leave it on the table, or be aware of properties that have been gone on the market, come off the market because they're sold, and then come back onto the market as well. Again, this is just being vigilant and looking at Zoopla and Rightmove and being aware of when this happens. But again, that's another great opportunity to get yourself a deal because the vendor probably is going to be frustrated at that point and maybe open to an offer.
Yeah, that's a really important point because your chances of getting a discount when a property has just come onto the market for the first time are probably slim. It may be that there are reasons why the vendor needs to sell really quickly for some reason, but more commonly, the estate agent has just given them this price. They're going to be anchored to that price. So if you immediately come in and offer 10% below it, they're probably not going to give it much consideration because I think, well, plenty of other offers to come. If you've got a property that's been languishing on the market for a while, you're far more likely to get agreement, especially if, as Rob said, it's previously come off the market and then it's fallen through for some reason. By that point, the vendor may be committed to another purchase. They may have made plans to move across the country. Anything could have happened and they may need to make that sale quickly, at which point your chances become a lot better. And that's linked into another ingredient in getting a discount, which is being known as a fast and reliable buyer. Now, this is admittedly difficult to pull off when you're just getting started because you don't have any track record and it's very easy to talk a good game. All investors do. As you continue to operate in an area, though, you can build a reputation of being someone who doesn't mess around, someone who's decisive, someone who buys quickly, and there's no complication. I know investors who've been operating in the same area for more than 10 years, where if someone does need to sell quickly, they will often get a call from the estate agent before it gets put on any of the portals. Because speed is more important to the seller than anything else, they effectively get first refusal. Now, that takes time and you can't really shortcut the process. What you can do, though, is do everything that you can to demonstrate your ability to move quickly, even if it is your first transaction. So show that you can buy in cash, or if you can't buy with cash, show that you have a mortgage lined up. Show that you have a solicitor in place and ready to be instructed. None of these on their own will seal the deal. And if there is someone with a better relationship or more track record ahead of you in the queue who's also interested, you're going to be out of luck. But these are all factors that you can use to move the situation in your favour. So those, Rob, all apply to standard purchases. But if circumstances align, there are other methods you can use as well.
There are. So, for example, if you do refurbs and you are very, very confident on your numbers, then you can look at properties that need refurbing that others have potentially written off because they've assumed the wrong numbers. They haven't got their numbers correct when they've done their estimates. And because of your knowledge, then you can get yourself a deal. Now, I appreciate that's quite a niche strategy, but some people listening to the podcast are true experts at refurbs and can get deals done that way. Another way of getting a deal, which is open to more people who listen to the podcast, is solve a problem that's cheaper than people think, or a problem that puts people off. So, for example, if there is a short lease on a property, that may put people off, but you can get a lease extension. It still puts people off because people don't want the hassle, or they're a bit scared, or there's a lot of unknown. You can do that. You just need to take some advice if you've not done it before to understand how much it's going to cost you and what a difference it will make to that property once it's done. But if you go through that process, you can get yourself a great deal. Rob and I know people who implement this strategy and nothing else. That is their strategy because they know lease extensions puts off a lot of people and hurt the sale process for vendors. So they step in, put aggressive offers in, and enough get accepted that they've made a very nice investment strategy off the back of it. Some of the properties may have legal issues as well that need resolving, or there may be issue with cladding or other things that impact the immediate value today but can be resolved. So don't be put off. If you're struggling with the other methods that we've given you and you're unable to get yourself a deal, don't be put off by putting the extra work in here through one of these approaches, because most people won't bother, and that's where the opportunity is. And the final way of potentially getting a discount, it's not a method that I've used personally, but it's just through sheer effort, which is through leaflet dropping or networking, just persistence. You will have to put a lot of effort in, and the results may take time to yield, but it is another way of approaching this. I think there's some stronger ways that we've mentioned, and those ways I would probably go through first, but you can do it via just extensive networking, persistence, leaflet dropping, just really being a bit of a pest in your local area so you become known that you are the person who wants to buy properties. And then just put the offers in when those opportunities arrive and you may get yourself a deal. And Rob, that's a persistent approach, but actually all of these methods do require persistence.
Yeah, you'll come across people who say that it's impossible to get a discount. That, oh, this is just stuff that you hear on courses and seminars and stuff. It doesn't actually work in reality. Those people, I would say, are probably just not trying hard enough. Because remember, we said it's possible to buy property at a discount. We didn't say it was easy. If it was easy, no one would ever be paying full price, and clearly that's not the case. Everything that we've talked about is based around a certain set of circumstances coming into alignment, normally something around the vendor's situation and their level of motivation. So you need that to line up with the timing and with your circumstances, and as I said earlier, you're not going to be first in the queue every time. If there's a more established buyer interested, in some of these situations, you'll miss out even if you do everything right. So I think what you've got to remember is that this is a numbers game. So if you look at the stats from our sourcing team, so these are people who do this professionally every day. So they should be pretty much the best of the best when it comes to negotiating deals. But if you look at their stats, they fail to agree terms on more than 95% of the deals that they look at. And that doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong. That's just how it is. They are in the business of driving a really hard bargain. They're pushing for a high level of discount and they need to make sure that lots of other things about the deal line up as well. So if they were going for a lower percentage discount or they were less selective about the quality of the development, then they'd be able to achieve a higher percentage. But what this means for you is if you are going for the best possible deal, you're looking for a really healthy level of discount on a great property, then you should be prepared to view at least 20 properties and follow up and do all the other things that we've talked about, because our team does that as well, in order to secure one. If you're not doing that, then the numbers would suggest that you're not going to be able to secure this type of discount. And that leads us on nicely, I think, Rob, to something you alluded to earlier, which is that, strange as it sounds, a discount shouldn't necessarily be something that everyone is fixated on.
It does sound strange, right? Because why wouldn't you? Well, the main reason for me why you wouldn't is because it's stopping you investing. I've interacted with so many investors over the years who've been waiting for the perfect deal. And I'll break it to you now. It doesn't exist. There is no perfect deal. There are great deals, there are good deals, there are average deals, and of course there are worse than that as well. But there are no perfect deals. But yet, some investors are waiting for the perfect deal. The ultimate area, the ultimate condition, the ultimate discount, every box ticked. It's not going to happen. What you need with an investment is most of your boxes ticked. Now, if one of those boxes is getting a discount and you are finding you've been doing this for 6 months and you haven't got yourself a deal yet, then you need to be taking action. If you have the funds to invest, you've been proactively working at getting a deal, you've made that commitment that you want to build a property portfolio, and you're 6 months in, you still haven't done it, you need to compromise. Because you're costing yourself more. Not being in the market is more expensive than waiting for a property to get a discount. Because over time, property increases in value. And yes, at the moment, properties aren't increasing at a great rate. But even if capital growth delivers you 2% and you get your rental return as well, that is a meaningful number. And that then starts to counteract any discount that you didn't get. So don't procrastinate. Don't use discount as an excuse for not starting. Get started. We've talked about it on the podcast so many times, but the true learning happens when you start. Don't use the excuse of I'm waiting for the perfect deal to stop you building a portfolio, because it will hurt you. It will end up costing you more. So it is possible. We do it every time. We have a company that helps us do it every time, so it is easier for us. But we've proven that you can do it yourself as well. You don't have to work with Property Hub Invest. We've given you loads of methods and loads of strategies of how you can approach this. So it is possible whether you work with a company like ours or do it yourself. But don't let it stop you investing. Because if you ask me, do I pay full price today or with a slight discount in 12 months' time? What am I choosing? I'm investing today every time.
All right, time for Hub Extra, that bit of the show where we give you a little bit more to improve your life. And Rob, I believe that something's made you uncharacteristically angry recently.
Well, yes, I suppose you could use the word anger. I think I've just about calmed down now. But I want to give an anti-recommendation, but in the interest of positivity, because that's what we are most of the time, positive, I will give a recommendation. But first of all, I want to warn you off Airbnb. We've probably recommended it as a Hub Extra many, many years ago as an interesting way to rent properties. But I've found on multiple times, not just on one occasion, so this isn't just one bad experience and then I've got angry and I'm ranting, but on multiple occasions now, I've found that my properties have been cancelled by the owners, that I've, even when I've not wanted to cancel it because they're going to get charged, I've had abuse from the owners of properties. And all that you could say, well, that's fair game, that could happen on any platform. For me, the frustrating thing with Airbnb is how they've handled it. Now, customer service may not be enough alone for you to stop using Airbnb, but the reason why I've stopped using it is for that reason, but also it's just become really expensive. When you look at what you get on Airbnb, Rob, we talked on the show not so long ago about Booking.com, and when you recommended Booking.com, I've used that since as an alternative way of booking Airbnb-style properties, and it's worked out very well. I know Booking.com is another massive company, and this is not a promotion, and they've not paid us, and there's no benefit. I've just found, since you recommended that, Rob, that I've been able to get better deals, more competitive deals, because Airbnb has that excessive pricing and cost structure. I've been able to get better deals on Booking.com compared to Airbnb. So that, combined with the poor service that I've received, makes me want to explore other options. And there are other platforms as well. There's plenty of other platforms out there that don't have the aggressive pricing and cost structure that Airbnb load on top of the prices. So it's nothing against vendors who operate on Airbnb. I'm sure a lot of vendors are frustrated with how much they have to hand over to them as well. But you can get the same types of properties, but for cheaper on other platforms. So do shop around. So it's sort of a rant, but actually I'm just helping you find a cheaper holiday in the future.
Yeah, it's sad. Like, I lived exclusively in Airbnbs for about 7 years, and there were occasions where we'd be going back to the same place. So we had a relationship with the owner, and they asked if we wanted to do it outside of the platform because it saved them from fees. But we said, no, let's do it through Airbnb anyway, because that way you've got some protection. You've got the benefit of their customer service if something goes wrong. But I've heard so many examples recently of their customer service just being terrible. And it happens when companies scale, right? It's one of those things. But it does make me wonder if they'll retain their competitive position, because for something like this, the customer service is so important. If someone has a bad experience, it can be really bad. And you're right, their fees are massive. They just keep going up and up. And you would have thought that that would be able to fund decent customer service, but apparently not. So I do still use it occasionally, but I always look at those other options first. Moving on to happier topics, we've started ending the show with a quick listener shout out. And this week's shout out is to Carl, who I actually met back at one of our meetups in Leicester years and years and years ago. But I didn't know he'd done this. He's written in saying, I've been a podcast listener since episode 5 back in 2013 when I had a single buy-to-let. I always still listen despite having moved on from that single buy-to-let to building 147 units. Good grief. That is quite something. I can't believe, Carl, you made it up to 147. Just imagine what you could have achieved if you started listening back on episode 1. That's all I'm going to say.
Carl, you've made me feel a bit lazy. I don't often feel that way, but I feel like I need to up my game. Carl, that's an incredible achievement, an incredible portfolio. I'd love to know the systems that you have in place to manage that. That's quite a feat. Well done. And well done to you for topping up your property knowledge this week. Go and get yourself a deal. Whether you work with someone else or do it yourself, just do it. It makes a massive difference to the wealth that you will create through property over time. You know what else will make a massive difference? Reading the Sunday Times. This Sunday, where we'll be answering your questions. You're just going to learn more. And of course, joining us for Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. And as you'd expect, we'll be back, same time, same place next week for the Property Podcast. So until then, take care, everyone. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.